On a bet, rich ranchers slept with the widow. What she revealed made him freeze. The sun hung low over the dusty plains of Texas, casting long shadows across the sprawling Double R Ranch. Marcus Richardson stood on his grand porch, a glass of whiskey in his hand, surveying the thousands of acres that stretched before him like an empire. At 42 years old, he was one of the wealthiest ranchers in the entire state. His cattle operation brought in millions every year, and his name carried weight in every business circle from Houston to Dallas. Marcus had built his fortune through shrewd deals and calculated risks. He was known for his confidence, some said arrogance, and his willingness to bet on anything, whether it was poker games in the back rooms of exclusive clubs or business ventures that made other men nervous. Marcus never backed down from a wager. His friends often joked that he had ice water running through his veins instead of blood. Life had been good to Marcus Richardson. He drove expensive trucks, wore custom-made boots, and owned more land than some small towns. Women found him attractive with his tall frame, salt and pepper hair, and the kind of weathered good looks that came from years working under the Texas sun. He had been married once in his 20s, but it ended quickly. Since then, Marcus had remained single, claiming he was married to his ranch and his business. The Saturday night poker games at the Cattlemen's Club were legendary in their county. Every week, the same group of wealthy ranchers and businessmen gathered around the green felt table, cigars smoking, whiskey flowing, and money changing hands. Marcus was a regular, and he rarely left without winning at least a few $1,000s. But the real entertainment came from the wild bets these men made with each other. On this particular Saturday evening in late September, the poker game was in full swing. Besides Marcus, there was Big Joe Hendricks, who owned the neighboring ranch, Thomas Wilson, who ran the largest feed supply company in 3 counties, and Robert Bobby Chen, who had made his fortune in oil before buying a gentleman's ranch to retire on. These men had known each other for years, and their friendly rivalry often led to outrageous challenges. The cards had been dealt, the bets placed, and the whiskey was making everyone loose and talkative. Big Joe leaned back in his chair, a smirk on his face as he looked at Marcus. "You know what your problem is, Richardson?" Big Joe said, his voice carrying that teasing tone that usually preceded trouble. "You think you can charm anyone, do anything, win any bet, but I reckon there's one thing you couldn't do even if you tried." Marcus raised an eyebrow, taking a slow sip of his drink. "Is that so? And what might that be, Joe?" The other men at the table leaned in, sensing something interesting was about to happen. Big Joe's grin widened. That widow woman, Elena Morales, who bought the old Patterson place 6 months ago. Word around town is she won't give any man the time of day. Turned down every single fellow who's tried to court her. I bet you couldn't even get her to have dinner with you, much less anything more. Everyone in the county had heard about Elena Morales. She had moved to their small town after her husband passed away, buying the modest ranch property that bordered the eastern edge of Marcus's land. She kept to herself mostly, running a small operation with just a few horses and some cattle. She was beautiful, that much everyone agreed on, with dark flowing hair and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. But she was also intensely private and had politely but firmly rejected every advance from local men. Marcus felt a spark of interest. Didn't like being told there was something he couldn't do. "What kind of bet are we talking about here, Joe?" Big Joe stroked his chin, thinking. "Let's make it interesting. I bet you $20,000 that you can't seduce that widow within the next 2 months. And I don't mean just sweet-talk her. I mean actually sleep with her." "That's a steep bet, Joe." "It's a steep challenge," Big Joe replied. "What do you say, Marcus?" "You always claim you're irresistible to women. Here's your chance to prove it." Marcus knew he should probably decline. There was something distasteful about betting on seducing a woman, especially a widow who was minding her own business. But his pride had been challenged, and the competitive fire that had made him successful in business flared up inside him. $20,000 meant nothing to him, but winning the bet meant everything. "You're on," Marcus said, extending his hand across the table. Big Joe shook it firmly, and the other men raised their glasses in a toast to the wager. They all knew Marcus Richardson never lost a bet. This would be entertaining to watch. The following Monday morning, Marcus drove his truck down the dusty road that led to Elena Morales' property. He had come up with a simple excuse for his visit. Some of his cattle had wandered near her fence line, and he wanted to make sure they hadn't caused any damage. It was neighborly, innocent, and gave him a reason to introduce himself properly. As he pulled up to her modest ranch house, he saw her in the corral working with a beautiful chestnut mare. She wore jeans, boots, and a simple blue shirt, her long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Even from a distance, Marcus could see why men in town were attracted to her. But there was something else, too. Something in the way she moved, with quiet confidence, completely focused on the horse and unbothered by his arrival. Marcus stepped out of his truck and walked toward the fence. "Morning," he called out with his most charming smile. Elena looked up, her dark eyes assessing him coolly. "Good morning. Can I help you with something? I'm Marcus Richardson. I own the Double R Ranch, your neighbor to the west." He leaned casually against the fence rail. "Just wanted to introduce myself properly and make sure some of my cattle that wandered this way yesterday didn't cause you any trouble." "No trouble," Elena said simply, turning her attention back to the horse. She ran her hand along the mare's neck with gentle expertise. Marcus wasn't used to being dismissed so quickly. Most women in the county would have jumped at the chance to talk with him, maybe even invited him in for coffee. Elena seemed completely uninterested. "That's a fine-looking horse you've got there," he tried again. "You training her yourself?" "Yes," Elena replied without looking at him. "I've got some excellent trainers at my ranch if you ever need help or advice," Marcus offered. "I don't," she said politely but firmly. Marcus felt his competitive nature rising. This was going to be more challenging than he thought, which somehow made it more appealing. "Well, if you ever need anything, I'm just down the road. Maybe we could have dinner sometime, talk about ranching, being neighbors and all." Finally, Elena turned to face him fully. Her eyes met his with a directness that was almost unsettling. "Mr. Richardson, I appreciate the neighborly gesture, but I'm not interested in dinner or anything else. I came here for peace and privacy, and I'd like to keep it that way. Have a good day." About her barn, leading the horse, effectively ending the conversation. Marcus stood there for a moment, surprised and, if he was honest with himself, a bit impressed. No one had dismissed him quite so thoroughly in years. As he drove back to his ranch, Marcus found himself thinking about Elena Morales more than he expected. There was something mysterious about her, something that went beyond her beauty or her rejection of his advances. She had a sadness in her eyes that he recognized, though he couldn't quite place why. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus found excuses to visit Elena's property or run into her in town. Each time she was polite but distant, never giving him an opening. He tried bringing her fresh vegetables from his garden, offering help with fence repairs, even mentioning a charity event in town that she might enjoy. Every advance was gently but firmly rebuffed. His friends at the poker table found his lack of progress hilarious. Big Joe reminded him weekly that he had less than 7 weeks left to win the bet. Marcus's pride was wounded, but something else was happening too. He found himself genuinely curious about Elena, wanting to know her story, understand what brought such sadness to her eyes. One afternoon, Marcus saw Elena's truck broken down on the side of the road about 2 miles from her ranch. She was standing beside it, hood up, looking frustrated. This time, he wasn't planning a seduction move, he simply wanted to help. "Need a hand?" he asked, pulling up beside her. Elena sighed. "It just died. I was heading into town for supplies." "Let me take a look," Marcus said, getting out. He knew his way around engines, having worked on ranch equipment for decades. After 15 minutes of tinkering, he identified the problem. "Your alternator shot. I can tow you back to your place and have my mechanic come out tomorrow to fix it." Elena hesitated, clearly not wanting to be indebted to him, but she didn't have much choice. "Thank you," she said quietly. As Marcus towed her truck back to her ranch, she rode with him in his truck. For the first time, they were in close quarters with nowhere for her to escape to. The drive back to Elena's ranch was quiet at first. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, acutely aware of her presence beside him. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, looking out the window at the passing landscape. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was loaded with unspoken words. "You don't have to be so suspicious of me, you know," Marcus said finally, breaking the silence. "I'm just trying to be a good neighbor." Elena turned to look at him, and for the first time he saw a hint of a smile touch her lips. "Mr. Richardson, I've lived long enough to know when a man is just being neighborly and when he has other intentions." Marcus felt his face flush slightly. She had seen right through him. "Fair enough," he admitted. "But that doesn't mean I can't also genuinely want to help when someone needs it." "That's true," Elena acknowledged. She was quiet for a moment, then added, "Thank you for stopping." "I appreciate it." When they reached her property, Marcus helped unhook her truck and left it near her barn. As he was preparing to leave, Elena surprised him by asking, "Would you like some coffee? It's the least I can offer after you helped me." Marcus tried not to show his surprise. "I'd like that very much." The furniture was modest, nothing like the expensive pieces that filled Marcus's sprawling ranch house. But there was warmth here, photographs on the walls, books stacked on shelves, and the smell of something baking coming from the kitchen. It felt like a real home, not just a showcase of wealth. Elena poured them both coffee and brought out some freshly baked bread. As they sat at her small kitchen table, Marcus found himself genuinely relaxed for the first time in weeks. "How are you finding life out here?" he asked. "It's pretty different from city living, I imagine." "I grew up on a ranch, actually," Elena said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. "In New Mexico. My father raised horses. I only lived in the city because that's where my husband's work was." "You must miss him," Marcus said gently. Elena's expression shifted, becoming distant. "Every day. But coming back to ranch life, it helps. The work, the quiet, the animals, it gives me purpose." Marcus learned that Elena had been married for 15 years, that her husband Diego had been an architect, and that they had planned to retire to a ranch together someday. That dream had died with him 2 years ago when a sudden heart attack took him at just 45 years old. Marcus found himself sharing things he rarely talked about. His own brief marriage that had failed because he cared more about building his empire than building a relationship. His loneliness despite being surrounded by people. The emptiness that success sometimes brought. When he finally left that evening, Marcus drove home with a strange feeling in his chest. He had gone there as part of a bet, but he had stayed because he genuinely enjoyed her company. That realization bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Over the following weeks, something shifted between Marcus and Elena. He still visited her property, but now it was to genuinely help with projects or to bring her things she might need. She began to open up more, smiling occasionally, even laughing at his jokes. It developed an easy friendship that surprised both of them. Marcus's friends noticed the change too. At the poker table, Big Joe teased him mercilessly. "Getting sweet on the widow, are you, Marcus? Don't forget, the bet is to sleep with her, not fall in love with her." Joe laughed, slapping the table. The words hit Marcus harder than they should have. He realized with uncomfortable clarity that he had stopped thinking about the bet weeks ago. Now he was seeing Elena because he wanted to, because her company made him feel things he hadn't felt in years. But the bet still hung over everything like a dark cloud. $20,000 and his pride on the line. More importantly, how would Elena react if she ever found out? The thought made his stomach turn. One evening in late October, Marcus invited Elena to dinner at his ranch. To his surprise, she accepted. He spent the entire day preparing, not wanting to overwhelm her with his wealth, but also wanting to show her a nice time. He cooked himself rather than having his housekeeper do it, preparing a simple meal of grilled steaks, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread. When Elena arrived, she looked beautiful in a simple green dress. Marcus gave her a tour of his ranch, showing her his operation, his prize cattle, and the horses he kept. She was impressed but not intimidated, asking intelligent questions and offering observations that showed her deep knowledge of ranching. Over dinner, they talked like old friends. Elena told him stories about growing up on her father's ranch, about the horses she had trained as a young woman, and about her dreams of building something meaningful with her own small operation. Marcus shared his own stories, including the struggles he had faced building his business and the mistakes he had made along the way. As the evening wore on, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He was falling for this woman, not just attracted to her beauty, but genuinely, deeply interested in everything about her. Her strength, her kindness, her wisdom, her quiet resilience. After dinner, they sat on his porch watching the stars come out. The night was cool and clear, and the silence between them was comfortable. "Marcus," Elena said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything," he replied. "Why did you really start coming around?" "In the beginning, I mean." This was the moment of truth, but he couldn't bring himself to tell her about the bet. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "I was intrigued," he said carefully, which was true enough. "You were different from anyone I'd met. You didn't care about my money or my reputation. You just wanted to be left alone. That fascinated me." "Project," Elena nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now I come around because I care about you," Marcus said, and he meant every word. "You've become important to me, Elena." She looked at him for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face. Then, to his surprise, she reached out and took his hand. "You've become important to me too," she admitted. "I didn't expect that. After Diego died, I thought I was done with all of this. I thought I'd just live out my days alone, working my ranch, keeping to myself. But you've been patient and kind, and you've made me remember that life doesn't end just because someone you love is gone." Marcus felt a wave of guilt wash over him. Here she was, being vulnerable and honest, and he was hiding something huge from her. The bet felt like a poison now, contaminating something that could have been pure and good. As he drove her home that night, Marcus made a decision. He would call off the bet. He would tell Big Joe he lost, pay the $20,000, and move forward with Elena with a clean conscience. His pride wasn't worth hurting her or ruining what they were building together. But before he could do that, Elena's feelings toward him deepened even more. She started inviting him over for dinner, calling him when she needed advice, and sharing more personal details of her life. They spent almost every evening together, either at her place or his. The physical attraction between them was undeniable, but they both moved slowly, carefully. Elena because she was still healing from her loss, and Marcus because he knew he needed to come clean about the bet before things went any further. 3 weeks before the 2-month deadline, Marcus went to Big Joe's ranch to tell him the bet was off, but Joe wasn't home, and his housekeeper said he wouldn't be back for several days. Marcus left frustrated, knowing he needed to resolve this soon. That same evening, Elena surprised him by showing up at his ranch unannounced. She looked troubled, and Marcus immediately invited her in. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concerned. Elena paced his living room for a moment before turning to face him. "I need to tell you something, Marcus. Something I haven't told anyone since I moved here." Marcus sat down, giving her his full attention. "You can tell me anything. Diego and I, our marriage, it wasn't what people thought it was. From the outside, we looked perfect, but the truth is, we had problems. Serious problems." She sat down beside him, her hands trembling slightly. "Diego was a good man in many ways, but he was also controlling. He made all the decisions about our life, where we lived, what I could do, who I could see. He wasn't physically abusive, but he was emotionally manipulative. I felt trapped for years." Marcus reached out and took her hand, saying nothing, just letting her talk. "When he died, I felt guilty because, along with the grief, there was relief. Relief that I could finally make my own choices, live my own life. I moved here to start over, to be the person I never got to be when I was married." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "That's why I was so cold to you at first. I was terrified of getting involved with another strong man who might try to control me. But you've shown me that not all strong men are controlling. You've respected my boundaries and my independence. You've made me feel safe." Marcus felt like his heart was breaking. Here she was, trusting him with her deepest pain and secrets, and he was still keeping the bet from her. He opened his mouth to tell her everything, but she continued talking. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Marcus," Elena whispered. "And that terrifies me, but it also feels right." Marcus felt the words hit him like a physical blow. Elena loved him. This strong, beautiful, wounded woman had opened her heart to him, and he was living a lie. The guilt that had been gnawing at him for weeks suddenly became unbearable. He pulled her close, holding her as she cried softly against his chest. His mind raced with what he should do. Tell her now? Wait until he officially called off the bet with Big Joe? Every option seemed wrong, and yet saying nothing felt like the worst choice of all. "Elena," he said softly, stroking her hair, "you don't know how much your words mean to me. But there's something I need to tell you, too." She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with those deep brown eyes. "What is it?" Marcus opened his mouth, ready to confess everything when his phone rang loudly in his pocket. He wanted to ignore it, but Elena pulled away, wiping her eyes. "You should answer that," she said. "It might be important." It was his ranch foreman calling about an emergency with the cattle. Several had gotten through a broken fence and were wandering onto the highway. He had to deal with it immediately before someone got hurt or the cattle caused an accident. "I'm so sorry," Marcus said, standing up. "There's an emergency with my herd. I have to go, right now." "Of course. Go. We can talk later." "Tomorrow," Marcus promised. "I'll come by tomorrow and we'll talk about everything, please." John nodded, and he kissed her forehead before rushing out to handle the crisis. It took him and his men 4 hours to round up all the cattle and repair the fence. By the time he finished, it was past midnight, too late to go to Elena's house. The next morning, Marcus woke up determined to tell Elena everything. He would explain about the bet, apologize profusely, and hope that she could forgive him. He would make it clear that whatever had started as a stupid game had become the most real thing in his life. But when he drove to her ranch mid-morning, her truck was gone. Our neighbor, old Mr. Peters, was checking his mailbox and told Marcus that Elena had left early that morning with a horse trailer, heading to an auction 3 hours away. She wouldn't be back until evening. Marcus spent the day in agony, unable to focus on work, replaying his confession in his mind over and over. He tried to reach Big Joe again to officially end the bet, but Joe was still out of town. Marcus decided he didn't care. He would tell Elena first, then deal with Joe and the money later. That evening, Marcus waited at Elena's ranch for her return. When she finally pulled in around 7, she looked exhausted but pleased. She had bought 2 young horses at the auction, beautiful animals that she planned to train and sell. "Marcus," she said, surprised to see him. "I wasn't expecting you." Help me get these horses settled and then we can talk. They worked together to get the horses into her barn, making sure they had food and water. The work was familiar and comfortable, the kind of thing Marcus had done thousands of times in his life. But everything felt different now, weighted with the confession he needed to make. Finally, they sat on her porch steps as the sun began to set. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and a cool breeze carried the smell of hay and earth. "Elena," Marcus began, his voice serious, "yesterday you told me something important, and you were honest and vulnerable with me. I need to be honest with you too, even though what I have to say might hurt you." Elena turned to look at him, concern crossing her face. "What is it?" "When I first started coming around, it wasn't entirely innocent. The truth is, some of the men at my poker game made a bet. Big Joe bet me $20,000 that I couldn't seduce you within 2 months." He watched Elena's face change, saw the exact moment his words registered. Her expression shifted from concern to confusion to hurt to anger in rapid succession. "You what?" she said quietly, standing up. Marcus stood too, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. "Elena, please let me explain. Yes, that's how it started, but that's not why I kept coming back. I fell for you. Really fell for you. I was planning to call off the bet weeks ago. I don't care about the money or winning. I care about you." "You made a bet," Elena said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You and your rich friends sat around gambling on whether you could sleep with the widow, like I was some kind of prize or conquest." "It was stupid and wrong," Marcus admitted, his own voice breaking. "I know that. I've known it for weeks. That's why I wanted to tell you. That's why I was trying to call it off." Elena wrapped her arms around herself, taking several steps away from him. "How long have you known you needed to tell me?" "Days, weeks, Marcus admitted. "But every time I tried, something stopped me. Fear, I guess. Fear of losing you." "So instead you kept lying," Elena said, tears streaming down her face now. "You let me open up to you, share my pain, tell you about my marriage, tell you I was falling in love with you, all while knowing you were keeping this secret." "I never meant to hurt you," Marcus said desperately. "Everything I felt for you has been real. The bet stopped mattering to me almost immediately. You have to believe that." Bitterly. "Believe you? How can I believe anything you say now?" "Was any of it real, Marcus? The conversations, the dinners, the way you looked at me? Or was it all just part of your plan to win your bet?" "It was all real," Marcus insisted. "Elena, please. I made a terrible mistake, but what we have, that's not a mistake. That's the most genuine thing I've experienced in years." "Get off my property," Elena said coldly, "and don't come back." "Elena, please, just listen. Now, Marcus," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I trusted you. After everything I went through with Diego, after all my fear about getting involved with someone again, I trusted you. And you betrayed that trust for a stupid bet with your stupid friends." Marcus felt tears in his own eyes now. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix this," Elena said. "Sorry doesn't take back the humiliation of knowing that men were sitting around betting on me like I was some kind of game. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that you lied to me for weeks." She turned and walked toward her house, then stopped and looked back at him. "You know what the worst part is? I was actually starting to believe that maybe I could have a future with someone. That maybe not all men were like Diego. But you're just like him, Marcus. You're just better at hiding it." The comparison to her controlling late husband hit Marcus like a physical blow. "That's not fair. I'm nothing like him." "Aren't you?" Elena challenged. "He manipulated me emotionally. You manipulated me as part of a game. The methods are different, but the betrayal is the same." She went inside and closed the door, leaving Marcus standing in her yard as darkness fell around him. He stood there for several minutes, hoping she would come back out, hoping for a chance to fix this. But her lights went off one by one, and eventually Marcus had to accept that she meant what she said. He drove home in a daze, his mind replaying every moment of their relationship. She was right to be angry. She was right to feel betrayed. He had taken a vulnerable woman who had been brave enough to trust again and proven that her fears were justified. The next morning, Marcus finally reached Big Joe by phone. "Joe, the bet is off," Marcus said without preamble. "I'm out. I'll bring you the $20,000 today."
"You're giving up? With a week and a half left?"
"That's not like you, Marcus. The bet was wrong from the start," Marcus said firmly. "I should never have agreed to it. Elena Morales is a good woman who deserves respect, not to be the object of our gambling." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Big Joe said, more seriously, You fell for her, didn't you? And I told her about the bet, and now she won't speak to me. So congratulations, Joe. You won. Marcus, I was just joking around, Big Joe said, sounding uncomfortable. I didn't think you'd actually fall for the woman. I'm sorry, friend. Not as sorry as I am, Marcus said and hung up. He drove to Big Joe's ranch and left an envelope with a check for $20,000. Then he went home and tried to figure out how to live with what he had done. Days passed. Marcus tried calling Elena, but she wouldn't answer. He tried visiting, but she wouldn't come to the door. He left notes apologizing, explaining, begging for a chance to make things right. Haven't thought of yet. His friends at the poker table had heard what happened. The atmosphere at the next game was subdued. Even Big Joe looked guilty. Maybe you should give her some space, Thomas Wilson suggested. Let her cool down, then try again. Or maybe she's right to shut me out, Marcus said bitterly. Maybe I don't deserve another chance. 2 weeks after their fight, Marcus saw Elena in town at the feed store. His heart leaped and he started toward her, but she saw him coming and quickly paid for her items and left. The look she gave him was cold and distant, like he was a stranger. Marcus felt something break inside him. He had lost her, truly lost her, and it was entirely his own fault. Elena stood in her kitchen staring at the stack of unopened letters from Marcus that had accumulated on her counter over the past 2 weeks. She hadn't read a single one. Every time she looked at his handwriting on the envelopes, she felt a mixture of anger, hurt, and something else she didn't want to name. Something that felt dangerously close to longing. She poured herself a cup of coffee and walked out to her porch, watching the sun rise over her small ranch. The horses she had bought at the auction were settling in nicely, and her daily work kept her busy enough during the daylight hours. But the evenings were hard. That's when she missed Marcus the most, and that made her angry at herself. How could she miss someone who had betrayed her trust so completely? How could she lie awake at night remembering the sound of his laugh, the warmth of his hand in hers, the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in the world? Elena's best friend from New Mexico, Carmen, had been calling her every few days to check on her. Carmen was the only person Elena had told about the situation with Marcus and the bet. You need to at least read his letters, Carmen had told her during their last call. Maybe there's something important in them. What could he possibly say that would make this better? Elena had replied. I don't know, but you won't find out by avoiding them. You're not the kind of woman who runs from hard things, Elena. You face them. Oh boy. Those words stayed with Elena as she went about her work that morning. She trained the new horses, repaired a section of fence, and cleaned out the barn. All the while, Carmen's words echoed in her mind. She wasn't someone who ran from hard things. She had survived a controlling marriage, the sudden death of her husband, and the complete upheaval of her life. She could certainly face some letters. That afternoon, Elena finally sat down at her kitchen table with a stack of envelopes. There were 12 of them, one for almost every day since their fight. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the first one. The letter was written in Marcus's bold handwriting, and it was dated the morning after their argument. He apologized again, explaining in more detail how the bet had started, how foolish and arrogant he had been, and how quickly his feelings had changed from seeing her as a challenge to genuinely caring about her. He wrote about lying awake that night, sick with guilt and regret. He promised he would do anything to earn back her trust. Elena read through each letter slowly. They were all different. Some were short, just a few sentences, apologizing and saying he missed her. Others were longer, sharing memories of their time together, telling her about his days, asking about her horses. One letter was simply a list of all the things he loved about her, from her strength and independence to the way she hummed while working with her horses. In the most recent letter dated just yesterday, Marcus's tone had changed. He wrote that he understood if she could never forgive him. He said he would stop trying to contact her because he didn't want to cause her more pain. He said he hoped she would find happiness and success with her ranch, and that he would always regret losing the best thing that had ever happened to him. Elena set down the last letter and realized she was crying. She was angry at him, yes. He had hurt her deeply, but she also saw genuine remorse in his words. More than that, she recognized something she had been trying to ignore. She missed him terribly. That evening, Elena drove into town to have dinner at the local diner. She needed to get out of her house, away from her thoughts. As she sat alone in a booth, picking at her food, she overheard a conversation from the booth behind her. "Did you hear about Marcus Richardson?" a woman's voice said. "It was Sally Henderson who owned the beauty salon in town." "What about him?" another woman replied. "Apparently he wrote Big Joe Hendricks a check for $20,000 and told him he refused to go through with some bet they had. Nobody knows what it was about, but Marcus has been a wreck ever since. He barely comes to town anymore, and when he does, he looks terrible. Lost weight, circles under his eyes. Whatever happened really messed him up. She hadn't considered how Marcus might be handling things. She had been so focused on her own pain that she hadn't thought about his. Well, serves him right for whatever fool thing he did, the other woman said. Rich men like him think they can do whatever they want. I don't know, Sally said thoughtfully. I've known Marcus for 20 years. He's always been proud and stubborn, but he's not a bad man. For him to look this broken, he must have really cared about whatever he lost. She left money on the table and walked out to her truck. As she drove home, her mind was spinning with conflicting emotions. Yes, Marcus had made a terrible mistake. The bet was disrespectful and hurtful. But he had also confessed it to her himself before the deadline of the bet had even passed. He had given up the $20,000 without even attempting to win. And in all his letters, he hadn't once made excuses or tried to minimize what he had done. He had simply apologized and taken full responsibility. Elena thought about her marriage to Diego. When Diego hurt her or controlled her, he would twist things around to make it seem like it was her fault. He would say she was too sensitive, that she misunderstood, that she should be grateful for his guidance. He never truly apologized for anything. Marcus had done the opposite. He had owned his mistake completely. He hadn't blamed anyone else or tried to make her feel guilty for being angry. He had simply said he was wrong and that he was sorry. Were all mistakes unforgivable? Elena wondered. Didn't everyone deserve a second chance, especially when they showed genuine remorse and tried to make things right? She thought about what she had told Marcus about Diego, about how controlling he had been, and she thought about how Marcus had always respected her independence and her boundaries. Until the bet, which he admitted was wrong, he had treated her with nothing but kindness and respect. When Elena got home, she found herself pulling out the letters again. She read through them once more, this time looking for something specific. She was trying to understand if Marcus's apologies were genuine or if they were just words designed to manipulate her into forgiving him. What she found was consistency. In every letter, his remorse was clear. He never once suggested that she was overreacting or that her anger wasn't justified. He never pressured her to forgive him or give him another chance. He simply expressed his sorrow for hurting her and his hope that someday she might find peace. Elena spent a sleepless night thinking about everything. By morning, she had made a decision. She wasn't ready to forgive Marcus completely, but she was willing to hear him out in person. She owed herself that much, to have a real conversation where she could look him in the eye and decide if his remorse was genuine. She called his number for the first time in weeks. Her heart pounded as the phone rang. Once, twice. She almost hung up, but then she heard his voice. Elena? Marcus sounded shocked, hopeful, and scared all at once. I read your letters, Elena said quietly. All of them. Then Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, Thank you for reading them. I meant every word. To talk face to face. Can you come to my ranch this afternoon? Yes, Marcus said immediately. Whatever time works for you, I'll be there. 3:00, Elena said, and hung up before she could change her mind. She spent the rest of the morning working herself into a state of nervous anxiety. She changed clothes 3 times, cleaned her already clean house, and practiced what she wanted to say. But when 3:00 came, and she saw Marcus's truck pull into her driveway, all her prepared words flew out of her head. Marcus got out of his truck slowly. Sally from the beauty salon had been right. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, his face was drawn, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But when he looked at her, his eyes held such raw emotion that Elena felt her breath catch. They stood facing each other in her yard, neither speaking for a long moment. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. Thank you for agreeing to see me, he said quietly. I wasn't sure you ever would. I wasn't sure either, Elena admitted. But I needed to see you face to face. To hear you explain in your own words, not just in letters. They walked to her porch and sat down, maintaining some distance between them. Marcus looked out at her property, seeming to gather his thoughts. I don't have any excuses, he began. What I did was wrong from the start. I let my pride and my competitive nature override my better judgment. When Big Joe made that bet, I should have told him to go to hell. But I didn't. I took the bet because I always take bets, because I always have to prove I can do anything. But something happened that I didn't expect. I met you, the real you, not the mysterious widow that everyone in town gossiped about. And you were nothing like what I imagined. You were strong and independent and kind. You called me on my nonsense. You didn't care about my money, and you made me work for every smile, every laugh, every moment of your time. Marcus's voice grew softer. I fell in love with you, Elena. Really, truly in love. Not the surface attraction I felt for other women, but something deep and real. And the more I fell for you, the more the bet felt like poison. I tried multiple times to reach Big Joe to call it off, but he was out of town. I should have told you sooner, I know that. I was afraid of losing you, which is ironic because keeping the secret is exactly what made me lose you. Elena listened carefully, watching his face. She had always been good at reading people, a skill she had developed during her marriage when she needed to gauge Diego's moods. Right now, she saw nothing but sincerity in Marcus's expression. Elena took a deep breath before speaking. Marcus, do you understand why this hurt me so much? It wasn't just about the bet itself, although that was bad enough. It was about what it represented. Marcus nodded, waiting for her to continue. After Diego died, I promised myself I would never again let anyone make me feel like I was less than a full person. With Diego, I was always an accessory to his life, something he could control and shape. When I found out about your bet, it felt like the same thing all over again. Like I was just an object, a conquest, something to win. I understand, Marcus said quietly. And you're absolutely right. That's exactly what the bet reduced you to, and I hate myself for being part of it. But, Elena, I need you to know that whatever the bet represented, what I felt for you was the opposite. You made me feel like I could be better than the arrogant man who took that bet. You challenged me, not as a conquest, but as an equal. Elena felt tears building but held them back. I want to believe you, Marcus. I really do. But trust isn't something I give easily, and once it's broken, it's so hard to rebuild. I know, Marcus said, and I'm not asking you to trust me again right away. I'm just asking for a chance to earn it back, however long that takes. They sat in silence for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Elena spoke again. I need to tell you something, she said. Something I realized while I was reading your letters. When Diego would hurt me emotionally, he would never truly apologize. He would find ways to make it my fault, to convince me that I was the problem. You didn't do that. You owned what you did completely. That matters to me. Marcus looked at her with hope in his eyes. Does that mean you might consider giving me another chance? I don't know yet, Elena said honestly. But I'm willing to try to talk through this, to see if we can find a way forward. Over the next hour, they talked more openly than they ever had before. Marcus explained in detail about the poker game, about how casual and thoughtless the whole thing had been. He told her that he had already spoken to Big Joe and the other men who had been there, making it clear that they were never to speak about the bet again and that what they had done was disrespectful. Elena shared more about her fears, about how hard it had been to open her heart to someone after everything she had been through. She explained that she wasn't just angry about the bet itself, but about the time he had let pass before telling her, the weeks when she had been falling deeper in love while he kept his secret. That's what scared me the most, she admitted. Not that you made a mistake, but that you kept lying to me by omission. It reminded me too much of Diego, who would keep secrets and then justify them by saying he was protecting me. Marcus leaned forward, his expression intense. I will never keep another secret from you, Elena, ever. If you give me another chance, I promise complete honesty, even when the truth is uncomfortable or might upset you. You deserve that. How can I know you mean that? Elena asked. How can I be sure you won't fall back into old patterns when things get difficult? You can't know for certain. That's what trust is, isn't it? A leap of faith. But I can tell you this. Losing you these past few weeks has been the worst experience of my life. Worse than my divorce, worse than any business failure, worse than anything. It showed me exactly how much you mean to me and how empty my life is without you in it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I want to show you something. This is a letter I wrote but never sent. I wrote it 3 days after you told me to leave your property. The handwriting was messier than in his other letters, as if written in great distress. She began to read. The letter started with another apology, but then it went deeper. Marcus wrote about his life before meeting her, about how he had measured his worth by his wealth and his conquests. He wrote about feeling empty despite his success, about going through the motions of living without really feeling alive. Then he wrote about meeting her and how everything changed. He described specific moments. The first time she had smiled at him, really smiled, when he told a joke about one of his stubborn bulls. The afternoon they had worked together fixing her fence, and she had teased him about his expensive boots getting muddy. The evening they had cooked dinner together, and she had thrown flour at him when he criticized her biscuit-making technique. Marcus wrote that these small moments had meant more to him than any business deal he had ever closed or any amount of money he had ever made. He wrote that she had helped him understand what actually mattered in life, and that he would spend the rest of his days trying to be worthy of her, whether she forgave him or not. Elena finished reading with tears streaming down her face. She looked up at Marcus, who was watching her anxiously. "Why didn't you send this one?" she asked. "Because I thought it was too much," Marcus admitted. "I was afraid you would think I was trying to manipulate you with big emotional declarations. I wanted to respect your space and your anger. Marcus, I need you to understand something. If we try again, it can't be like before. We can't just pick up where we left off. We need to start over, slowly, building things on a foundation of complete honesty." "I understand," Marcus said quickly. "Whatever you need, whatever pace you're comfortable with, I'll follow your lead." "And I need you to understand that I might not be able to fully forgive you right away," Elena continued. "There might be moments when the hurt comes back, when I feel angry or betrayed all over again. Can you handle that? I'll handle whatever you need me to handle. I'm not going anywhere, Elena."
At this time, Elena took a deep breath.
"Okay, then here's what I propose. We start with friendship. Just friendship. We spend time together, we talk, we get to know each other again, but without any pressure or expectations. Can you do that?" "Absolutely," Marcus agreed. "Though I have to be honest, being just friends with you is going to be hard because I'm in love with you. But I'll respect whatever boundaries you set." Found somewhere. For the first time since he arrived, Elena smiled a small smile. "See, that's the kind of honesty I need. Thank you for saying that instead of pretending it will be easy." Over the following weeks, Marcus and Elena slowly rebuilt their relationship. They started with simple things: coffee on her porch once a week, phone calls every few days to check in. Marcus helped her with a project building a new training pen for her horses, working alongside her but never pushing for more than she was ready to give. Elena found herself looking forward to their time together, but she remained cautious. She watched carefully for any signs that Marcus was falling back into old patterns, any hint of dishonesty or manipulation. But what she saw instead was a man genuinely trying to be better. Marcus was patient in ways Elena hadn't expected. When she had bad days and pulled back emotionally, he gave her space without complaint. When she asked him difficult questions about his past relationships or his values, he answered honestly even when the answers weren't flattering. He never pressured her for more than she was willing to give. One evening about 6 weeks after their conversation on her porch, they were sitting together watching the sunset. Elena had been quiet for a while, and Marcus had learned not to fill every silence with words. Sometimes she just needed to think. Finally, Elena turned to him. "Marcus, I need to tell you something important." His expression became serious. "I'm listening. I've been watching you these past weeks. I'm listening, looking for cracks in your behavior, for signs that you were just putting on an act until I forgave you. But I haven't found any. You've been patient and honest and respectful of my boundaries. You've shown me through your actions, not just your words, that you're serious about changing." Marcus didn't interrupt, just waited for her to continue. "I'm not saying I've forgiven everything completely," Elena went on. "The hurt is still there, and I think it might take a long time to fully heal. But I'm saying that I believe you're genuine. I believe you really do love me, and that you're committed to being a better man." "I am," Marcus said softly. "More committed than I've ever been to anything." Elena reached out and took his hand the first time she had initiated physical contact since their fight. "Then I think we can try moving forward. Not rushing, but moving forward. Building something real together." Marcus lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Giving me another chance. I promise I won't waste it." They sat together as the stars came out, hands intertwined, both knowing that they still had work to do, but feeling hopeful about their future together. Several months later, Elena and Marcus stood together at a charity event in town. They had decided to go public with their relationship, which had grown stronger with each passing week. The event was raising money for a local youth ranch program, and both of them had donated generously. Big Joe Hendricks approached them during the evening looking uncomfortable. "Marcus, Elena, I need to say something. I owe you both an apology for that stupid bet. It was disrespectful and wrong, and I'm genuinely sorry." Elena looked at the large man who had caused so much trouble with his thoughtless words. She could have been angry, but instead, she felt calm. "Thank you for saying that, Mr. Hendricks. It takes courage to admit when you've been wrong. You're a class act, Mrs. Morales." "Marcus is a lucky man." After he walked away, Marcus pulled Elena close. "You didn't have to be so gracious to him." "I know," Elena said, "but holding on to anger only hurts me, not him. Besides, if that stupid bet had never happened, you and I might never have had to do the hard work of building real trust and honesty. In a strange way, it made us stronger. Marcus looked down at her with love and admiration. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "You didn't find me," Elena corrected him with a smile. "You made a bet about me, messed everything up, and then had to work incredibly hard to earn my trust." "That's not luck, that's consequence and redemption." Marcus laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "You're right, as always. But I'm grateful for it all, even the hard parts, because it led us here." As the evening wound down, they drove back to Elena's ranch together. Marcus had started spending more time there, helping her expand her horse training operation. They had talked about their future, about possibly combining their ranches someday, but they weren't rushing anything. They had learned the value of taking their time and building something solid. Elena looked over at Marcus as he drove, his profile illuminated by the dashboard lights. She thought about everything they had been through, the betrayal and hurt, the long process of forgiveness and rebuilding trust. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. What Marcus had revealed when he confessed about the bet had initially frozen her with shock and anger, but that moment of truth, as painful as it was, had ultimately set them on a path towards something deeper and more genuine than what they had before. Sometimes, Elena thought, the things that break us can also be the things that help us rebuild stronger than we were before.